one of the biggest parts that I got from like a Waldorf education was like learning things from multiple perspectives. You know, we we learn outside, we learn indoors, we learn from books, we learn from touching, feeling, hearing. Like, you know, you really like learn it inside and out. And like, I think a lot of people, that's why they come here, you know, in the first place. And like now being in a high school where the philosophy around learning is a little different, you know, you really see that. And like, I think a lot of people like crave it and like start to appreciate it a lot more. I certainly do. You know, like all the artistic skills that you come away with are definitely invaluable.
In my experience, when I transferred from Waldorf to public high school, I went to Newtown High. It struck me similar to the way you heard it from a Waldorf student. I heard it from public school student, and it was the opposite kind of experience. They basically at that point were saying, we don't want to learn anymore. We're kind of done with it. The idea of learning has been not fun. And so by high school, by freshman year, all of the friends that I was making in Newtown High, they were burnt out. They were done with it, and they were just counting the days until they were done with high school, until they could go to college and get a job. And I realized that pretty immediately. And I think looking back, every student that goes through Waldorf, we all have those days of just, I don't want to go to school. Like, we're kids, you know, like you don't want to go to school some days. But looking back, I would have traded every day off just to have the opportunity to learn at Waldorf, rather than what I know my peers were experiencing, because they clearly weren't enjoying it. And I think at its simplest, that's what it comes down to. You enjoy the learning process here, and that's unfortunately not facilitated as well elsewhere.
Could you talk about what it is about the approach to academics that enables you to succeed? Is there a particular approach to academics here that's different from other schools?
I was just gonna say, so like one of the issues I take with like more traditional education is just like that number. So like the second you get into high school, you're given this GPA or this number or this test score, and like that's, you know, the teacher hands out the grades, you know, oh, Billy, you're smarter than Joe, you know, like you see this and it like becomes that competitive aspect. But like going off what we were just talking about, like if you all have the same goal and like if you're all working together, I think it's just like more beneficial.
I think there's an attitude at Waldorf of meeting each student where they are instead of making them measure up to a system. And I think there is an attitude of recognizing that every kid, no matter how they learn, contributes and has something to offer. So how do you learn? Instead of, if you don't learn as a part of the regulated system, you're a problem or you're a hindrance, what are you adding by learning in a different way? And how can that enrich your peers? And how can that enrich your learning cycle going forward? Because if you don't learn in the most traditional way, kind of that adaptability we were talking about earlier, that's something you can bring to the next stage of learning, your jobs. It's always being able to enlighten people around you with a different way of looking at something. And Waldorf doesn't squish that, it encourages that.
And it's a complete different way of looking at the world, and you're taught to appreciate people and the environment. I mean, look around you. Who else has like these gorgeous paintings and wooden cubbies, and there's nothing plastic, and there's no technology, and you know, you're really encouraged to appreciate the environment and I don't know, just people, and instead of getting caught up, I think, in little things. But that's really special.
It's virtually impossible now to predict the way, what kind of careers and things are going to be available in 30 years. But the key elements was adaptability and creativity that children had to, you know, learn, to sort of, those were the key skills. So if you all could speak to what are some of those skills and how has Waldorf prepared you in those ways, or with those skills in particular, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Let's start with here. I'm a graphic designer, so the creativity and art in Waldorf obviously stayed with me. But I think it's not even what career paths we all chose, but it's that Waldorf taught us to look at things in a more creative way. So it doesn't really matter like what you end up going into. There was no one asking us in 8th grade like what we wanted to do when we grew up. it was like we didn't have to pick a career. Like I didn't feel pressure to be like, oh my God, I have to decide now like what my job's gonna be. It was just like what you were interested in learning, and everything was approached in such a holistic, creative way.
I'm actually reading this book right now. I was talking about how doctors, when they look at a patient, they automatically form biases and form a diagnosis within 15 seconds of looking at someone. And that spoke to me in the sense that I think here we're taught to look at the whole picture, value everyone for what they are, and I don't know about everyone else, but me personally, I think that I've really met a lot of great people here that I have gotten to know and have realized that they're totally different than my initial judgment of them. And I think, I don't know, that's kind of what I think of when you ask me that question. And I think just Waldorf gives you that open-mindedness, accepting nature of everyone, and I think that is important in any career.
What Waldorf allowed us to do and encouraged actively on a regular basis was a creative capacity. And what I realized, I was watching some TED Talk recently or something, but they mentioned everything around us, everything that we acknowledge as part of our society, at one point or another didn't exist. And at some point in history, someone in their mind said, I see this, I can create this, this can be real. And without the ability to come up with that image in your own minds, you're not going to create anything. And that doesn't say that you can't be an active, valuable member of society, but you probably won't be a contributor to the next phase. And so as we move forward into this, this automated system where jobs become kind of obsolete, we're going to need to be able to create. We're going to need to be able to express ourselves in some way that's real and authentic, and you learn how to do that here. And I think that goes far beyond any job.
So I found that Waldorf students in general, myself, my classmates who I graduated with, are just well-rounded students, and it's something I don't normally see at Quinnipiac. I'm in a very science-heavy program, and so I'm with kids who excel in the sciences, and there are some requirements you have to take. You have to take English, you have to take humanities classes, and that's where they struggle. And I've had the opposite experience. I definitely excelled in English my freshman year. I have to say I haven't taken too many classes outside the sciences, but my professor actually, after I completed the course, said to me, you set the standards very high for this class. Thank you for participating, and that really stood out to me. I didn't think that I was any different than anyone else, so that really gave me some confidence, and I loved English. I love reading, I love writing, and I'm sorry I don't do more of it in school, but I think that's what stands out to me in my mind.
From my experience and a lot of the friends I have from Waldorf, not only are well-rounded, but they value the well-roundedness that they are provided with. They look for meaning in the arts and the sciences sort of equally. As a engineer in college, it's like expected that I'm going to be great at crunching numbers and math and all that. And but I really look forward to my philosophy class and my English class I just took. And my fellow engineers are complaining about the core and why do we have to take these classes? Why do they matter? And I'm excited to go because it's a break from this sort of world. I get to step into another one. I get to talk about morals and meaning and what is life and all these questions that get left behind if you only focus on a certain thing. So I think it's also just like you come away with this great value of being what it means to be a well-rounded human, so you can approach the world in kind of this like wholehearted way where you're not missing out on certain aspects of life. Also, in terms of ways that we stand out, I was pretty lucky. I first did a year in public school because we had a combined class, so I did my 8th grade in public school, and I immediately got some pretty high recognition from my teachers. Having joined, I was selected to be the scholar leader of my 8th grade class, which essentially meant I had to give a graduation speech at 8th grade, and I'd been there for a year, which was a little strange, which was like really awkward for me because there was no like, hey, it's I've known you guys for so long, all these memories we've created together. It was really strange, but it was definitely I got selected for being a kid who got his work done, engaged in class, showed appreciation for the teachers and what they were trying to communicate, showed a love for learning in every class that I went to. And I mean, that was just natural coming from Waldorf School. It wasn't, you know, putting on a face. It's something that continues, and it's so that's like an example of a way that I was able to stand out because of the education I got here. Just really appreciating and valuing all the different facets and ways you can learn, and just like eating it all up.
I think that well-roundedness that they just mentioned had a lot to do with us being more mature too. I felt that me and my classmates were much more mature going into high school, and then we're chosen for leadership positions kind of because of that maturity, because we're in such small classes and it's noticed, like if you're acting up and but it's true, and you're encouraged to mend those relationships because it's in such close proximity, and they're like your siblings, you know. Like I knew a lot of them since I was like 4. Like you grow up with these people, and you're encouraged to talk through your problems, and that's a really mature thing to do. And so I think then going into high school and in college, I mean, I got a lot of, and I know that my friends did too. Lizzie did, like everyone in my class was going into leadership positions. I was like a day proctor at my school, and was taking on stage manager at the plays. I was an RA in college, and it just like felt right. Like I wanted to help lead because that's what I was used to. And I felt like I was missing it then. Like when I went into college, I went to a fairly small high school as well. So I think the biggest transition for me was going into college, and I missed like that connectedness. But it was because I was more mature, and I felt that I needed to be that leader role that Waldorf had prepared me for.
One difference I saw between myself and I also went to Newtown High School, which is a big high school in this area. I think 2,000, 2,500 students. So going from a class of 10 to a class size of 500 was definitely a transition. But I do think that the interpersonal skills you gain by being in such a small class, there is that family aspect to it where you do know everybody like they're your siblings, and they're your closest friends, and also you have disagreements and you have to work things out. Whereas in a public school system, it seems that some kids get kind of lost in the shuffle, or kind of hide in the shadows and aren't necessarily included in everything. So I think the interpersonal skills that we gained by being in that small class environment definitely was something that I saw.
Can I just real quick comment on that? One of the things I noticed when I switched over to public school was there was an active avoidance of conflict within the classroom. So if an issue came up between two students, like it just didn't get dealt with. It just got pushed over until the class was done. The bell would ring, and as far as that teacher was concerned, okay, cool, it's out of my field of vision. I don't have to deal with it anymore. But here, you don't get that opportunity. I don't want to say forced, but highly encouraged to communicate and resolve issues. And you don't really have an option sometimes. You just have to figure it out. And so you come out of that experience being able to actually interact with the world in a way that adds value and doesn't just say, hi, this person's mean to me, who's going to help me? Like, who's going to tell them that they've been mean to me? Like, no, you're going to go tell them. You're going to go have a conversation with them. And I think that's important.
I would say that I did have a little bit of a transition period where I was uncomfortable. I was lucky enough, I do have a twin sister, so we went in together. We were here together and went to Newtown High School together. So maybe Devin can talk more about his experience. But I did find that the first couple weeks I was feeling it out. But one of the great things about a bigger school is there's something for everybody, and there's a group of people for everybody. So I found that through clubs and sport teams, you're quickly finding your home. I played sports, so I made friends fairly quickly. Kind of get forced into that friendship with your teammates and whatnot. So I found that the transition period was a couple weeks, and then I felt quite at home.
To comment off that, there's definitely a transition period. switching from anything that you know well to something that you've never experienced before. You're going to have a transition period with anything. But I think when I made that transition personally, it really was, just at a system level. Like, I really kind of came into it and went, okay, this is just a new process that I have to learn. Learning hasn't changed. Social skills haven't changed. Being respectful to my teachers hasn't changed. Like, the only thing that changed is, okay, now I have to make this number at the end of the week on my score. And someone's going to tell me that I didn't do well enough if I don't hit number X. And so that was the transition. It was more an adjustment to the process of just my education outcome has changed. It's no longer, are you learning? Are you enjoying your process? Are you actually becoming a well-rounded human being? It was, how much do you know? And it was quantitative now. And that was the only thing that changed. And that, I think, perspective shift actually was really valuable and really important to see the difference between a more intangible value system versus a completely tangible, just quantifiable, like, okay, you either know this or you don't, and if you don't, we think less of you. And so that acknowledgement came pretty quickly. You realize, like, okay, I've got to make the grades, otherwise I'm not going to be told I'm doing well here, but you know that, you can actually create the right relationships to succeed. And that was important. I made the transition, connected with the right people, went, okay, they know how to do this. They're getting A's. I'm gonna make friends with them. And so that was where I learned, and that was, I think, where we had a quicker advantage.
I think that that's a period of life where everyone feels a little lost. So it doesn't matter if you're coming from public middle school, from out of state. It doesn't matter if you've been with these people your entire life. You're still going to feel that kind of gap. And okay, how do I fit into this? And there's that pressure cooker of how do I fit the mold that exists, I think, in a lot of mainstream middle schools. And you come from Waldorf School and you've grown up with these people and spent every day with them. And it's impossible to grow up in that environment and not realize, okay, everyone is a person and everyone's totally different. And if you can recognize that everyone is individual, I think it's a lot easier to recognize that in yourself and to feel comfortable with that. So I think that when I transitioned to public schools, I went to Danbury High School, which is like 3,000 kids, really big. But I think as much as I saw all of us feeling a little bit lost, I felt really grounded in who I was. So even though there may have been that lack of an immediate social connection because I didn't know anyone, that comfortability with who I was allowed me to make connections. And I actually felt, I think, grounded a lot sooner than some of my peers who had been in the Danbury public school system their whole lives did, because I felt more comfortable with myself.
Going into the public schools, I had to take like an entrance exam for math because they had no idea where to place me.
Okay.
And I bombed it.
Okay.
I bombed it right off the bat. Because it's the first test I'd ever taken. And 2 days.
Was it just like test taking, like
I
nerves,
don't
or?
remember.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I was freaking out.
Okay.
It was the first, but it felt bigger because it was an entrance exam. It was I didn't know what to prepare for. It was everything. And then there was bubble, fill in the bubble sheets, like never seen that before. It didn't work. And 2 days into the class, the teacher said, "Oh, you don't actually belong here. You're going up to the higher math level." And it was no joke. It was just easy. It was I learned enough, absolutely enough here to be able to go in and just like excel at math. I've always I never identified myself as like a math person while in Waldorf, but the second I got to the public schools, I was able to really excel in them much easier than the students around me, than my peers. Study groups where I was able to more or less teach concepts to other kids after having seen them like once or twice and just like pretty much picking up on it right off the bat. It's something that's continued to be true through college. When study groups happen, I find a lot of the time I'm able to break down the process in a way, and I tend to teach my peers more than they teach me, just because I think the way that it was approached as a younger kid is just like, it's kind of fundamental. It's more about, I think, the enjoyment of it than anything else. I think what gets in the way of a lot of people doing math is the fact that it's frustrating, and if you get the answer wrong, like, I'm bad at math, I don't want to do it. but like actually enjoying the process of solving numbers and working with them allows you to kind of like keep a more clear head and focus and keep going. And I think that's what Waldorf did for me. And yeah, like I said, the transition after that, like I've never had a problem in a math class, and I've at this point taken some pretty advanced theoretical stuff, and I've just found it fascinating and enjoyable.
Well, you mentioned technology. How do you feel about the impact of not having computers?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. I
Feel pretty good about it.
I think it was great. I think it's, we were talking about this actually before we came out here to speak with all of you, that, I mean, when we started, iPads and iPhones weren't really a huge thing, right? We had flip phones, I think, in high school. Obviously, media and technology was out there, but it wasn't like in your face, like, you know, now you go out to a restaurant and there's like 3-year-olds sitting with their family watching, you know, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse while the rest of their family is like having dinner. And that, it's like really sad to me. And I didn't realize that, like how important that difference is. I think until high school, when I started babysitting for like 2 different families, and one of them went to public school and the other was sending their child to Waldorf school. And it was just such a stark difference, and it made me really appreciate my experience here, because I was like, oh my God, I want my kids to go to Waldorf school. Like, I don't want them to be trapped in this computer. And it was so hard because I saw the kid that was, you know, on his iPad and stuff all the time and didn't want to engage with me and wasn't creative. And then, you know, the next day I'd go to babysitting the Waldorf child, and she could entertain herself for hours, just like stories that she made up, and oh, she's so creative. And I remember she wanted to see my phone, and I was like, oh no, like, why do you want to see my phone? And she wanted to look up pictures of sharks. Like, it's just the way, like, children look, from children at Waldorf look at technology in a different way. And I didn't feel that I had any problem adapting to technology once I was exposed to it. I mean, Abe's an engineer, I'm a graphic designer, like, I'm on computers all the time, we have to work our way through technology, and I don't think that any of us had a problem doing that, but it had us look at it in a more creative way because we didn't have to interface all the time.
I think the biggest thing for me was just learning to use it as a tool rather than like a lifestyle. So, you know, just looking up what you need to know, like not living your whole life in like this digital world.
So when I was kind of in that college application process, one of the schools that I applied to and the school that I ended up going to was Roanoke College, which is in Virginia. And they had this scholarship competition. And basically you had to make the hike all the way down to campus. But if you made it there, a few days they did this, and you basically wrote an essay on campus from a prompt and then had an interview. And you know, I kind of told my parents about it. They were like, oh, are we really going to go all the way down to Virginia for this? And I was like, I think we are, yes. So we did. We went all the way down there. And I sat down in this room, and I was like, is this going to be the most important essay of my life? Which it might end up being, and it certainly has been up to this point. And we got the paper, and I looked at the prompt, and it said, what do you think the role of technology in education should be? And I was like, am I being punked? And it was really ended up, as much as it was important, it ended up being one of the easiest essays I've ever written in my life. And I got to talk about, you know, technology, how it's a tool and not a lifestyle, and how I talked about, you know, botany and being able to plant plants and feel your fingers in the soil and being able to make things with your own 2 hands, and how there's no textbooks. Instead, you draw pictures and write essays about the things that you've learned. And, you know, I went on to have a really good interview as well, and I ended up winning a full tuition scholarship for all my 4 years, which was very
What about the early childhood experience? Would you say that anything from that shaped who you are today? Do you remember it, or?
I mean, if I could comment on that, I think just the emphasis on play and it being okay to play, and I think we're so quick to rush our kids to grow up, and they're going to have so much time for that. I mean, now as a recent graduate from college, I'm just like, I don't want to be an adult like There's so many things that I just don't want to deal with yet. And I think that my ability to just still like enjoy play is so important. I think that's something that developed really early on. And I wasn't behind because I didn't learn to read in kindergarten. I wasn't behind because we didn't do our ABCs. I just was. And I think letting kids be where they are is like a lost thing in our society.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my first thought was I went to Apple Blossom actually, but my first like memory that I even remember was in the playground there, like watching a caterpillar on a leaf, and that like blew my mind. Like I'm just thinking about like how would my life be different if it was like an iPad screen, like watching a cartoon, or like that's just a lot less beautiful, and like you just don't learn as much from that.
I saw a quote recently, actually. It was, teaching a child not to step on a caterpillar is as valuable to the child as it is to the caterpillar. And I think that as far as describing the kindergarten experience here, like that really hit home. Like I remember playing outside. I remember, you know, enjoying my like 4 and 5-year-old years. Like that's, I wouldn't want any other memory at that time. So.
It's so fun to hear you talk about like how you positively look back on your experience and your transition, and sort of like having some of these moments like, oh, I'm so happy I went to Waldorf School. Did you feel like that when you were here in school?
Most of the time. Most of the time.
Honestly, I didn't. Not all the time. I questioned everything. I begged my parents to let me go to a different school. It's hard, especially with 5th grade. Starts getting hard to relate to your peers, I think, or at least in my case. And we had a switch of teachers, right, 5th grade. So that year was very difficult for me, but I definitely don't regret staying. And I think just finishing out the experience is definitely worth it. And I've seen that people who do transition midway through their education here do struggle a little bit more transitioning to the public school environment. So I think definitely making it through to the end was worth it, and I wouldn't have it either way. And like everyone here is saying, I would definitely send my kids to Waldorf School.
I think for me, like 8th grade, I was like ready to get out of here. Like I was just skeptical. Like through sports, I knew a lot of kids out of school. You know, and like, oh, it's awesome. They play on computers all day. Like this sounded great. Like a whole new world. And then like, you know, as like, you know, I'm a junior now. Like I'm just appreciating it more and more. And you know, I love coming back and doing these things and just like getting people excited about it because you know I really believe in it. And you know, at the time, you know, you don't always appreciate it, or you can't always like see the bigger picture, or what you're really learning. But I think in the end, you'll definitely appreciate what you learn here.
Right, you're
It's
always
like eating
asking
your
why.
veggies.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just eating your veggies.
Yeah.
No kid gets it at the time. They look back and they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
But that's, oh sorry, you go ahead.
yeah, there's definitely good days. There's definitely some bad days. I mean, that small of a class, small of a school, you're bound to like come up with conflict, and you come home and this kid said something, and I'm mad, and I don't like it, and why can't it be different? Why do I have to do these assignments? And that's just a natural kid at school. But it's also, I think, really important when the parent lays down the rule that like you're not going anywhere. You're staying here, and then as a kid, it goes back to the adaptability thing. You say, all right, like I am going back tomorrow. How am I going to make it different? How am I going to make it better? How am I going to change? And that's like goes back to the whole interpersonal skill set that we develop, because it's if I have a fight with somebody in a 10-person class, I'm going to have to solve that problem when I go back in through those doors tomorrow. If I'm in a public school and I've got 100 kids, I can dodge one kid in a crowd of 99, and I don't have to ever solve that. But so I think it's the days that were like tough, but you knew you were going back. They're actually like some of the most beneficial, because kids like to complain, they don't get it. But it is like you see that. I see that now looking back, like those days where it was hard and I had to go back the next day and learn to make it better. Like, actually some of the most important, because you learn a lot more when things are tough than when things are easy. And that's not to say that I thought that overarchingly it was really positive and really great, but those days that were tough are the ones you actually learn a lot from, especially if like the word is like we're not taking you out because like you're unhappy for a few days. Like you know, you're gonna stick it out and you're gonna learn how to deal with this because we expect you to have these skills as a good human being. And there's really not a point where it's like too early to like enforce that into your kid. Solve your problems. Like you can do it. Everybody's human here, and everybody here is kind of like focused on that idea. It's part of a reason that everybody's coming here, and so you know that that kid who's sitting across from you, who you got a problem with, like also like, has to learn to cope with themselves and with you as well.
If you have a kid in this school, like give yourself a pat on the back, like high five the person next to you, because I know growing up with my mother K through 8, her initially when we first started going to kindergarten, she was driving from Milford or West Haven.
West
like,
Haven to Bridgewater.
Yeah, West Haven to Bridgewater. Like that's like an hour and 20 minutes every
2.5
day.
hours a day.
Yeah, and yeah, right. Reasonably so. My whole family was like, "Carrie, what are you doing? You're doing this crazy drive every day. You're, you know, paying for him to go to kindergarten. What? Like, what are you doing?" And I wouldn't say that the flack got any better over the years. Like, it pretty much like until I graduated and they were like, "Okay, yeah, he knows things. All right, yeah, he's not failing high school. Okay, yeah, I guess Waldorf worked out. All right." Like, it took a really long time for people to actually start supporting her decision, and I just really commend that decision that any parent makes to actually stick it out and to deal with the social influence of why aren't you conforming, because it's tough to make that choice and then to stick with it. So seriously, thank you all, because none of this would be happening otherwise.
I don't know if it's a question really, or just a statement that I'm just so thoroughly impressed with you all, and I am just so excited that my daughter gets to come here now. And I mean, I knew that. I knew that the education was special, but I hadn't talked to such a large, or heard, you know, such a large group of people, you know, adults talking about what it was like in their experience and how they are who they become because of the education, the ways in which it influenced them. So
thank you for
making
the choice.
And
that's not easy either.
Yeah, and in this world today, so many things that you're saying are just so critical and important, I think. Like connectedness, you know, resilience, adaptability, creativity, I think they're just critical. So it's just, I'm impressed with you all, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Questioning like how people define success. How have you guys experienced that mentality versus what you've accomplished here or learned here? Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can just read this pamphlet and see all the different things that we're currently doing. It's really great to be back here and with so many great accomplished alumni from so many different years and see what everyone else is doing. And clearly, you know, the education here can prepare you for any path that you want to take. So I think that's what I'll say. And I did want to also mention that Isabel, you'll be happy to know I picked up knitting needles last year, and I still know how to knit. Successfully knitted 4 scarves. So. Currently taking orders.
Jennifer, to expand on that, like the how you define success question, I think like in this experience we kind of define success on our own to a certain extent, and it becomes, you know, I love the John Lennon quote where he's like, you know, I went into first grade and the teacher said, I forget exactly what it was. If anybody remembers it, exactly, help me out. But basically the teacher said to him, you know, complete this assignment and say what you want to be when you're older. And he wrote down happy. And the teacher said, you don't understand the assignment. And he was like, well, you don't understand life. And you know, that I think probably contributed to a lot of his music. But if our definition of success is numeric, then we're just always going to be chasing a number. And I think having that sense of just, self-certainty is success.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
It's funny you mention that because right here on the front it says success is not just an outcome; it's a way of living.
Look at that.
And and that's true. You know, you look at, you know, a lot of people are looking at this sort of template. They're checking the boxes. They're doing the thing. But I think you at least me personally, what I think I've gained a lot from Waldorf is asking more of like the questions of, am I happy? Am I going to bed fulfilled? Do I feel like I have purpose? And that's personal. That's not what somebody else is telling me. That's me knowing that I woke up and I did what I could and I did the best I could that day. And I went back to bed and I care about myself, I care about those around me and supporting them and making them better. And it's more of the intangible successes that are the most important to an individual, I think, not the ones that are that you can write down on a piece of paper and say, I graduated from here and I now hold this job and so. It's how do you feel about it? How are you comfortable? Are you happy with what you're doing? Does it matter to you? Does it matter to the world? Are you creating positive impact? And those are the types of questions that I know I've had with my fellow classmates about like what it means to live a good life and a successful life. That's what we like. These are questions we talk about when we sit down about what we want to do, what path are we on. So I think it's I think all stems from where we came from and growing up together in a Waldorf community. Asking those kind of more personal and self-reflective questions that sort of drive us like day to day.
So I currently do attend like a private high school that does put a lot of pressure on like scholastic achievements and grades and stuff like that. And last year there was 2 girls who were super good friends and both, very high achieving, and it came down to senior year. They were both trying to get into the same school, and it broke their friendship apart. They were no longer friends because they were competing for the same spot, and that's just sad to see. And like, what did they lose, over what they were trying to gain? So something to think about.
Going into high school, I did look for those big name colleges, and that was something that I focused on. And then going through my college search, I realized I just needed to be in the place that was right for me. So I think I'm happy and I feel like I'm in the right place for right now, and for me that's success.